Hey up everybody, welcome back to the Audio Cycling YouTube channel, where today I'm going to be talking about the Velogames Amstel Gold Race, which is starting tomorrow. We'll be looking at the Super Classico 6s, the Classic Squad game, and also the Women's Edition, because there is a competition available for all of these. So firstly, looking at the Super Classico 6s, we've got Pogacar as the most expensive rider, and probably you should be taking him because you can make a really good team even by just having him on your team. I think that he is the favourite to win, so therefore if you're not picking him, I think it's a little bit insane, to be honest with you, just because of how much of a favourite he is. So Pogacar's pretty much a must-have to go onto your team. Mohoric, not as much so, but he is still a rider who suits this race, and I could still certainly see him doing quite well, despite the fact that I think he crashed in Roubaix. Then again, a lot of riders crashed in Roubaix, so that perhaps doesn't create too much of a differential, to be honest with you. But Mohoric perhaps quite expensive at 26 of this race. I think I'd be more tempted if he was, say, 22 points, for example. So maybe not Mohoric, but I think that I wouldn't be surprised if he still does good in this race. Pidcock, of course, the last race he did was Flanders, where he finished... Well, he finished like 50 something, but that it wasn't really representative of how good he was in the race. He was really animating some moves, and I think that coming into the Ardennes, he is going to be in some seriously good form. I'd be really surprised if he doesn't do well in this race, to be honest. And so therefore I think that he is still a good pick. I think that he'll be the leader for Ineos, and I think he's probably like second favourite in the bookies, although I haven't checked recently. But Pidcock's still a really good one. Barguil, again, he is pretty good at these punchy races, but is he going to be better than like a Kuznetsov at the same price at 22? Probably not. I'd much favour somebody with a bit more kick. But Barguil is still certainly a rider who could come inside the top 20. But note, it's easy to forget that he finished in third place last year, and that was probably a very under the radar performance last year. Could he do the same this year? I think he could do, especially since Jumbo-Visma don't have Wout van Aert or Primoz Roglic here, or Jonas Vingegaard, for example. So they have quite a free card to play with Tiesj Benoot, but they also have Attila Valter, who I'll get onto later on. So I think that Tiesj is still a good choice when you consider that third place last year. He could certainly do something similar. Kuznetsov, third place at Brabant-Sipel, gives me a lot of confidence in picking him, to be honest with you. Second place last year, I'm sure that he'll be ruining that bike throw to Kwiatkowski. So I think that Kuznetsov will be looking to try and redeem himself and get a good result. Probably trying to win it this time round. So I think that Kuznetsov is a great choice. Arambaru's looking pretty good at Basque Country, but was lacking in some of the stages, which I thought he would be getting over. The ones which Schmid did good in, I really thought Arambaru would be there. So perhaps not in the most like tip-top of shape, but saying that, I think that Arambaru is still a good shout for the top 10. So's Higuita, to be honest with you. Higuita looked really good at Basque Country. I think he finished top 10 in GC, and he won a stage, so he's clearly still got that kick that he's quite renowned for having in like earlier on in his career. So I think that Higuita's a good choice as well. Madouas was ill at Flanders, I think it was. So if he's got over that, then he's certainly going to be a good choice here, especially since there's no Stefan Kung this time. But there is David Gaudu, so he might have to contend with a bit of leadership friction there, perhaps. Mollema, again, he's finished top 10 in this race before, could certainly do it again. Trentin wasn't looking that great at Brabant-Sipel, despite the fact that the weather conditions quite suited him, so therefore I'm not overly certain about his abilities to do that great here, considering that they have Pogacar, who will be the head of the team. Van Avermaet, probably not that great of a pick. Neither's Coquard. I know he's good at hills, but I'm just not sure about this one. Is really probably a little bit outside of his range. Gaudu's a good one, especially when you consider that good at Paris-Nice. He was okay at Basque Country, not as good as I was hoping, but still decent enough. And I think that he's got an okay sprint, and he does do quite good sprints for quite the small rider that he is. So I think that Gaudu would be a rider for the top 10. I think winning will be quite difficult though, unless he comes up against somebody who's really bad at sprinting. The other 18-point riders, aren't that great. Hershey, Mikko Frolic-Honore, I want to pick, but to be honest with you, he just hasn't shown the form so far this season. Søren Krauw wasn't that great at Brabant-Sipel. Rudy Malard will be a domestique. Mike Woods, maybe, to be honest with you. He's shown some good flashes of form so far this season, but would I be more likely to take him over a Gaudu? No. So therefore, if you need like a second 18-point rider, I'd say that Woods is probably the best one. 16-point riders, Quentin Hermans was in the top 15 at at Brabant-Sipel, so at least he is showing some decent form there. Kwiatkowski, of course, won this race last year out of pretty much thin air. Like, he didn't really do anything in 2022, and then he went and won Amstel. So it's very possible that a rider can come out of nowhere and just win this race. Form isn't everything, but it's certainly a pretty decent gauge as to how somebody's going to do. But Kwiatkowski could certainly win it again, and I wouldn't be opposed to that because I really like Kwiatkowski. Paulus is probably the best 16-point rider going when you consider how good he was at Flanders. He didn't do Brabant-Sipel, unfortunately, but I think that he is still going to be a really good rider. He is turning into a fantastic one-day racer, and I think that he is almost a certainty to go onto people's team. Lorenzo Rota could do well, could not do well. It's hard to gauge how he's going to do sometimes, but I think a top 20 would be a pretty realistic ambition. You then get into quite some really good 14 and some 14 and 12 point riders, like a Baggioli, for example. He was good at Basque Country, regularly sprinting some pretty good positions. Rui Costa was ill at Basque Country, so perhaps don't take his results for gospel that he's got on his PCS, but he's certainly a rider who could do well in this race. He is a very good one-day racer, so Rui Costa's still a good choice, but a little bit risky considering that we don't know how he's recovered from that illness. Guerrero, alongside Arambarou, will be leading Movistar, and I think it'll be interesting to see how they do in their first sort of Ardennes Classics without Alejandro Valverde, and seeing how they divvy up the leadership there. I think that Guerrero's a really good one. He is a very fast rider in sprint, very good at climbing. We'll see how him and Arambarou go. I think that Guerrero is a good choice, but perhaps a little bit risky over somebody like a Baggioli or even like a Schmid, to be honest with you. I think Schmid is going to be a really good choice for a lot of people. Really good at Basque Country. He was performing way above my expectations, and I think he's in some really good form recently. We saw that Ben Healy did well in Brabant-Sipel after a really good run of form, and I think that Schmid could be an exact same kind of carbon copy of that. So I think Schmid's going to be a really good one. So Skelmoser seems to do, weirdly, a bit better on the shorter climbs, despite the fact that he is touted as quite a GC guy, so therefore you'd think that his longer climbing would be better, but I think that his short climb is really strong, and therefore could be a really good rider for Amstel Gold. Tom Schoen's 9th place at Brabant-Sipel, good bit of form there, so I think that Tom Schoen is another good one to be picking, top 15 possibly. Corwin Strong, I think that he is still quite young, and I think that this might be a little bit outside of his range, but then again, I wouldn't be surprised if he was in, say, like the second group sprinting for like the minor places, for example. Simon Clark, of course, finished in this second place in this race in 2019. I'm not sure about how his form's been looking recently, to be honest. I just think that I'd rather pick somebody like Alexander Kamp, for example, who was good at Brabant-Sipel. I think that Kamp's looking really strong recently, and Tudor Pro Cycling will be absolutely all around him. He will be the leader for the team, so I think Kamp's a good one. Colon's okay, but he wasn't looking that great at Brabant-Sipel. He was getting dropped from that group of like 6 or so up the road, so some questions there. Quinn Simmons, maybe, but again, still hasn't lived up to that kind of classics hype that a lot of people have built up around him over the past few years. Attila Volta is one who I'm toying with picking just because good in the Strade Bianchis. He's been good at Basque Country this year, and I think that, like I said earlier, without Jumbo Visma having the big leadership here, I think that Volta could certainly sneak up under the radar. Axel Zongler, good in rainy races, but I think that Amstel's going to be a pretty fine day, so I think that Zongler might not be the greatest choice. I'm not sure how he goes over the longer distances. I still think that he's developing as a rider in that sense. 10-point riders, I don't think there are any good ones, to be honest with you, so I'd probably just try and avoid picking those. 8-point riders, you've got Battistella, Cavagna. Cavagna especially is looking like a more reformed rider. He's really trying to repurpose himself into more of a classic style rider. Kobe Kosen's looking good at Giro de Sicilia, so watch out for him. Godon, of course, won the Brabant-Sipel, so he could be a decent one as well. Tobias Harlan, like Johannesson, hasn't shown the greatest of form, but could certainly come out of nowhere and do something. Oscar Onley, another good one. Ida Schelling, of course, won a sprint at Basque Country, but wasn't climbing that great, despite the fact that he did show us his numbers. And he obviously is in really good form, but he was just perhaps not going with the moves fully. Van Hills is another good 8-point rider for you to be picking. I think that Lotto, considering that Cron wasn't the strongest at Brabant-Sipel, might be looking towards Van Hills a bit more to try and kind of cover the moves and stuff. 6-point riders, if you need them, I think that there are some decent ones. Ferron won Paris Camembert recently, so he could be a bit of really outside rider. You've got Romain Gregoire, of course, the young sensation. He finished in the top 10 at Stadi, so a good one to be picking. Ben Healy is here as well. I think that's a really good one. I didn't even know, but this is why I'm doing this video a bit later, because I got caught out at Provence-Appel. But Ben Healy would be a really good 6-point rider. I said that he was going to be the best 6-point rider in Provence-Appel. I think it's certainly possible that he could do the same here. And then there's also Sean Quinn would be a decent one to be picking, considering that he is pretty fast in a sprint. Sobrero was looking really strong at Basque Country as well. I think he finished like 17th in GC, but inside the top 5 like 3 times or so. And then outside of them, maybe it's Ben Zwiehoff. He's a bit of a better climber, and especially since they're reliant upon Higuita, he might sneak a decent result. And then 4-point riders, there aren't really that many which I like. Maybe Sean Flynn was good in the under-23 races. Maybe you're looking towards assist points with a Majchuk or a for Kuznetsov, or with Sverchek, or with Josh Tarling for Pidcock or something like that. So you're looking for assist points in the 4-point rider category. This is the team that I've got right now. I'm quite happy with it, but I am concerned that maybe I'm trying to be a bit too fancy. We're trying to get all these mid-level riders in, and maybe I should just be a bit more basic and just pick a Pidcock and then pick a Ben Healy or something, for example, in the 6-point rider range. But let me know what you think about that in the comments down below. Am I trying to be too fancy with my picks here? In terms of my classic squad game, I'm now down to 3 transfers, and this is the team that I'm going with. And so we've got Kuznetsov, Badjoli, Pogacar, Pidcock, David Gaudu, and then a couple of guys for assist points, and also Paulus. For this race, I've brought in Pogacar, Pidcock, and Gaudu so far. It's very possible that I could bring in more when you consider that a lot of these riders who are doing Amstel will then be going on to do La Flèche Wallonne, so it's sort of you're getting 2 races out of them rather than saving your transfers for later on. Of course, the risk with that is that these riders could crash out or not do very well, and therefore you could have wasted a transfer. So it's a little bit risky putting more riders in right now, but I think that it could work out quite well, especially since I'm running low on the transfers. I think that I'm having to kind of play a little bit more risky right now. And then in terms of the women's race, I've got Vollering, Lippert, Perisco, Van Anrooy, Shabby and Sant-Esteban. Very much basing my picks upon Provence-Appel, because we've got the podium there, and also Shabby, who I think finished in 4th place. Van Anrooy is just a really good 12-point rider, and I've also gone with Sant-Esteban, although there are some other good 12-point riders who I'm considering going with instead of her, including riders like Anna Henderson or Costa, for example. So yeah, Sant-Esteban, Paladin as well, Alexandra Manley, Corinne Lebecki finished in 9th place in this race last year, Anus de Costa, Niamh Fisher-Black, Kristen Faulkner, Bredevold. There are so many good 12-point riders that I could pick any of them. It's just that I've got Sant-Esteban in here right now. But let me know what you're thinking in the comments down below. I think very certain you have to pick Vollering. Lippert's good value at 16. So Perisco's good value at 14. I think that probably Van Vleuten hasn't shown the best form recently, so I'll be avoiding her. Kopecky, this race doesn't perhaps suit as much. Elisa Balsamo has done well in this race in the past, but more of a sprinter type, so therefore I'm a little bit apprehensive there. But Elisa Longa Borghini is a good one to be picking. Cavalli's coming back from injury. Ashley Mulman-Passio is a good one. Nevia Doma's good too. Voss, perhaps not in the greatest of form, but still always a threat. Up to Ludwig. There are so many good options that you can be going with that the women's bit almost deserves its own video, but I'm just going to stick to my regular format. But let me know what you think in the comments down below in terms of what teams are you going with. Should I try be fancy with my mid-range picks or not? And all that is left to say is to stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next video. Salut!